They invited the cleaning lady to humiliate her. She left owning everything. Naomi Ellison had almost thrown the invitation away. It came tucked inside a gold-trimmed envelope, hand-delivered by a house assistant who could barely suppress his smirk. "Mr. Lorne said to give this to you," he said, the edges of his voice slick with something that wasn't kindness. She turned it over in her hands. Her name, Miss N. Ellison, was printed in cursive on the front, elegant and cold. Inside, a card for the Lorne Foundation annual charity gala, held at the same estate she scrubbed, mopped, and vacuumed 5 nights a week. Dress code, black tie. Location, the Lorne residence. Time, 7 p.m. sharp. Note, formal attire strictly enforced. Strictly enforced, Naomi repeated to herself with a dry smile. She knew exactly what this was. For 2 years, she'd worked quietly in the Lorne mansion. She arrived before sunrise, left after sunset. She cleaned the marble floors others strutted across in heels. She changed linen on beds she'd never sleep in. And every now and then, she caught whispers in the hallway, always cruel, always intentional. It's hard to find good help these days. At least she's clean. Some of them aren't. Grayson Lorne, the man who signed her paycheck, barely acknowledged her unless it was to criticize. He once asked if she could use less pine cleaner because the house was starting to smell poor. He had no idea who she really was. But he was more cruel to her because she looks like a nemesis he wanted to avoid at all cost. So when the invitation came, wrapped in gold, coated in sarcasm, Naomi had nearly thrown it in the trash. But something made her pause. Maybe it was the fact that he assumed she wouldn't show. That he was daring her to. Maybe it was the way her daughter's photograph, framed beside her tiny kitchen sink, seemed to catch the morning light a little differently that day, like a reminder. Or maybe she was just tired of shrinking to fit inside someone else's version of who she was. She reached into the back of her closet that night, not to borrow, not to buy, but to reclaim. The dress was wrapped in plastic, stored with lavender sachets, untouched for nearly 20 years. Deep emerald green, sleeveless, silk. It belonged to her mother once. And the last time Naomi wore it, she was someone entirely different. Before money was stolen, before bloodlines were buried, before her life was rewritten. When she stepped into the foyer of the Lorne mansion that evening, heads turned instantly. The same people who once whispered behind her back now stared openly. Their mouths smiled, but their eyes flinched. She wore the dress like it was made for her, not rented, not borrowed, not stitched together to impress. Her posture was tall, shoulders steady, hair pulled into a simple, elegant twist. She looked like she'd been born for this room. Grayson saw her from across the room and nearly dropped his glass. "Naomi," he said, walking toward her with the forced charm of someone trying to hide panic behind polished teeth. "You came." "Of course," she replied smoothly, accepting a champagne flute she wouldn't drink. It would have been rude to decline. He laughed awkwardly. "Didn't think you'd have something to wear." She smiled politely. "Some things can't be bought. They are passed down." Grayson looked at her, really looked, and for the first time in years, something flickered behind his eyes. Not recognition. Not yet. But something less comfortable. A twitch of memory. "You clean up well," he muttered. "I don't clean up," Naomi said, her voice calm. "I arrive as I am." She didn't need a spotlight. The room gave it to her anyway. Guests turned to stare. Conversations slowed. People who used to walk past her without a glance were now trying to remember if they'd ever seen her at all. Naomi stood in the center of it all, not smug, not vengeful. Just ready. She hadn't come for spectacle. She had come for the truth. And the night was just beginning. Naomi didn't move from the center of the room. She let the whispers swirl, let the silence thicken, let every guest feel the weight of their own assumptions. It was Patricia Fennick, wife of a venture capitalist, who finally broke the tension. She approached with that kind of tight-lipped smile society women wore when they weren't sure if they were being gracious or simply nosy. "Naomi, is it?" she asked. "Forgive me, I thought you worked here." Naomi turned toward her, face calm. "I still do. Just not tonight." Patricia blinked, uncertain whether to be amused or offended. "Well," she said, flustered, "you certainly dressed the part." "This dress belonged to my mother," Naomi replied. "She wore it in this very house, actually. Years ago." Patricia's brows knit. I didn't know your family was in social circles. Naomi's gaze didn't waver. They were. Until someone made sure they weren't. The conversation fizzled, but Patricia's unease stayed. Around the room, heads leaned closer together. Naomi was no longer just the cleaning lady who showed up. She had become a curiosity, a disruption, a threat, and Grayson Lorne was starting to realize it. He watched her from across the room, trying to act unaffected as he laughed with guests and topped off champagne flutes. But his eyes kept darting back. The way she carried herself, poised, assured, familiar, it bothered him. Scraped at the edges of something he'd buried long ago. He moved toward her again, drink in hand, voice louder now. "Ladies and gentlemen," he called out, tapping the rim of his glass, "can I have your attention?" The room quieted. "Tonight's event is about charity," he said, smiling too wide. "Giving back. Offering opportunity to those less fortunate. And what better example of that spirit than the presence of our very own Naomi Ellison, who has generously blessed us with her company." A few guests laughed uneasily. Naomi didn't flinch. "She's proof," Grayson continued, "that anyone, regardless of background, can enjoy a night like this. That's the beauty of what we are doing here." There it was. The dig beneath the compliment. The line drawn between them and her. Naomi tilted her head slightly. "Funny," she said gently, "I don't recall you inviting anyone else who cleans your baseboards to join you tonight." The tension in the room thickened again. The air prickled with discomfort. But Naomi wasn't done. "You speak about opportunity as if it's something you hand out. Like a favor. But you've spent years pretending people like me didn't exist, unless it benefited you." A hush fell. The string quartet stopped mid-note. Grayson's jaw tightened. "That's not fair." "No," Naomi said softly. "What's not fair is what you did to my family." Gasps followed. Grayson's face drained of color. He opened his mouth, but Naomi raised a hand. "You wanted me here to humiliate me. But the truth is, I belong in this room more than you ever did." She reached into her clutch and pulled out a photo, old, creased, but protected like something sacred. It showed a man with salt and pepper hair standing beside a woman in an emerald green dress, younger Naomi clutched between them, no older than 4. "Your father," she said. "And my mother. This house was once theirs." Grayson stared. His hands trembled. "No. That's not possible." Naomi's voice didn't rise, but the gravity of it filled the room. "Your father, Samuel Lorne, didn't just own this estate. He raised 2 children. One, of his late wife, and one with my mother or me." A woman near the bar dropped her glass. It shattered. No one moved to clean it. Naomi looked around the room, at the sea of stunned faces. "You all came here tonight to pat yourselves on the back for your generosity. But maybe what this place needs more than charity is truth." She tucked the photo back into her clutch. "I'm not here to beg. I'm not here to fight. I'm here to reclaim what was taken." And with that, she turned and walked away from the crowd, not retreating, but rising. While behind her, Grayson Lorne stood frozen, a man beginning to feel the weight of a reckoning he thought would never come. For a moment, the grand ballroom of the Lorne estate stood still. Grayson didn't speak. He couldn't. His fingers fidgeted with his champagne glass, eyes darting from guest to guest, but no one would meet his gaze. They weren't just stunned anymore, they were curious. Afraid. Watching him the way people watch a man balancing on a ledge. Naomi remained composed, her voice clear but never cruel. She had waited too long for this. She wouldn't rush the truth now. "Samuel Lorne raised me in this house too." She reached into her clutch again and pulled out a velvet ring box. "This," she said, opening it carefully, "is the Lorne family crest ring. He gave it to my mother before I was born. Said I'd never want for anything." The sapphire shimmered under the chandelier light, unmistakably real, unmistakably Lorne. Grayson took a sharp step forward. "Where did you get that?" Naomi didn't flinch. "From the safe. Behind your father's study panel. You remember the code, don't you? 0419, your birthday." Grayson staggered slightly, and his wife Monica stepped toward him. "Grayson," she whispered. "Is this true?" "Of course not," he snapped. "She's lying. That ring could be stolen. The photo could be faked. This is all insane. She's not lying. The voice came from the rear of the room. Heads turned. An older man stepped forward, slow but steady. Dr. Elias Moore. 4 years, he'd been the family's trusted physician. The man who'd signed Samuel Lorne's death certificate. He stepped beside Naomi and took a deep breath. I kept quiet for 20 years, he said. But I can't anymore. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Samuel didn't die of heart failure, Dr. Moore said. He was poisoned. Not all at once. Slowly. Over weeks. It wasn't natural. All because someone was in a hurry to inherit him, he said, facing Grayson. And the last thing he told me, the day before he collapsed, was that he planned to change his will. Grayson's face blanched. That's a lie, he choked. You're covering for her. Dr. Moore reached into his coat pocket and pulled out an envelope. This is the real will. Samuel signed it 2 days before his death. He gave a copy to me, for safekeeping. In case something happened to him. In it, he names Naomi Ellison as his legal heir, his daughter. A ripple of noise spread through the room. Confused murmurs, incredulous gasps, shuffling feet. Then a second voice chimed in. I can confirm it's valid. Marcus Delane, a sharp-eyed attorney, stepped out from the back, holding a briefcase and a folder stamped with the California probate seal. Witnessed, notarized, and preserved. Until now. Naomi stayed silent as they spoke, her presence steady as stone. Grayson's confidence finally cracked. He wasn't angry now. He was scared. You can't do this, he said, voice rising. That estate was settled years ago. Not if the original will was suppressed due to fraud, Marcus replied evenly. Which, given the forged death report and stolen documents, we can now prove. But she's just Grayson stopped himself. A cleaner. A worker. A background character in a world he controlled. But the room had already turned against him. Naomi finally spoke again. You could have shared everything. Family. Legacy. You could have honored our father's wishes. Instead, you buried them. You buried me. Grayson tried to protest, but no one was listening. I came back to this house because I needed a job, Naomi continued. But I stayed because I needed the truth. And now I have it. She turned her eyes toward the guests, all the ones who had once looked through her. Tonight, this house was meant to humiliate me. But it has revealed you. She looked at Grayson one last time. And you've finally shown the world who you really are. The sirens came just after midnight. By the time the police arrived at the Lorne mansion, the gala was no longer a celebration. It was a crime scene in silk and sequins. Officers pushed through stunned guests, their shoes echoing across the marble floors as they approached Grayson Lorne. Mr. Lorne, the lead detective said calmly, you're under arrest for fraud, obstruction of justice, and suspected conspiracy in the unlawful death of Samuel Lorne. The room gasped again, but Naomi didn't. She just watched. Grayson froze, but didn't resist. There was no more fight left in him. As they cuffed him beside the grand staircase, the one his father once descended with pride, the reality of his downfall settled like dust. He glanced at Naomi. Please, he whispered. We are family. Naomi met his eyes. You made sure I grew up believing I had none. You erased me and my mother. He said nothing after that. From the back of the room, Monica stood motionless. Their son had just texted her from college. Mom, is Dad really being arrested? It's everywhere. She didn't reply. She couldn't. As Grayson was led out the front doors to a frenzy of cameras and reporters, Naomi turned and stepped away from the chaos. She didn't need to watch him fall. She'd come to rise. 6 months later. The office was quiet, not silent, but calm. The sound of typing, soft laughter, someone playing music faintly from a desk radio. The old Lorne Company headquarters had changed. The walls were repainted, the artwork replaced. And in the executive office at the top floor, Naomi Ellison now sat behind the desk that once belonged to her father. She wore simple gold jewelry. Her hair was tied back. A photo of her mother rested beside her, and beside that, a hand-drawn card from one of the 2 girls she'd adopted. A knock. Miss Ellison, her assistant said, peeking in. Forbes is here. Ready when you are. Naomi nodded. Send them in. The journalist, young, polite, curious, asked her everything. About Grayson. The scandal. The money. The power. But Naomi paused when asked, "Do you think this was revenge?" "No," she said quietly. "Revenge would have been tearing everything down. I chose to rebuild." "And what would you say to people who still think you were just a cleaner who got lucky?" Naomi smiled faintly. "I'd say they're half right. I was a cleaner. I scrubbed floors, I emptied trash. But none of that made me less. It made me stronger. I never needed luck. I needed truth." The journalist sat in stunned silence. Outside, the company had changed too. Former janitors had been promoted. Interns mentored. A daycare now operated on the first floor for employees' children. Naomi had installed an open-door policy, personally meeting with entry-level staff once a month. When asked why, she always said the same thing. "Because I remember what it feels like to be invisible." She declined TV shows, brand deals, and book offers. She didn't want to be famous. She wanted to be effective. Under her leadership, profits had risen, but more importantly, people had stayed. They worked hard, because they felt seen. One quiet evening, Naomi sat at home helping the girls with their homework. The little one turned and asked, "Mom, why do people say you're a hero?" Naomi paused, then smiled. "Because once upon a time," she said gently, "someone tried to erase me. And instead of disappearing, I wrote myself back in." She didn't win by shouting. She won by standing. She didn't conquer by taking. She conquered by proving she never needed permission to belong. Never underestimate quiet strength. Dignity doesn't shout, it endures. And sometimes, the most powerful justice isn't loud or vengeful. It's steady, strategic, and full of grace. Because real power isn't in proving who you are to others, it's in never forgetting it yourself. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories that inspire, challenge, and stay with you.